Hi, this is David Wolinsky back with another interview from the audio archives of Don't Die. This time I'm bringing to you the second half of my conversation with Jesse Schell, a game developer and academic. We spoke on October 5th, 2015. If you'd like to read a full transcript of this Q&A, please check the link down below in the description. Also down there you'll see a link to my Patreon where your support helps me continue with NoDon'tDie.com. Thanks.
So this is a silly question, or at least it sounds like an obvious thing to answer, but why is it important for kids' games to be good or not garbagey, as you said?
Well, I mean, for an educational game, if it's meant to educate, then it should do that. And I mean, I guess it all depends on your I guess it all depends on sort of your goals in terms of what you're trying to get done. I mean, if you want someone to pay attention to something, it better be engaging, and if you want somebody to learn something from something, it better be able to teach. I mean, things should be able to live up to their claims. That's all.
I mean, do you think it hurts kids to be playing like lazy reskins of existing games or bad games in general?
Well, it depends what you mean by bad games. Kids generally don't play games they don't enjoy.
This is true.
unless there's absolutely nothing else to do.
Yeah, it's not like it was a couple decades ago.
Part of what kids always do is they like to just explore what's new, and a lot of times what's new may not actually be very good, but it's new, so they spend some time exploring it. And if it's not any good, they'll quickly give it up, right? Tamagotchi was new, and so all the kids explored it, but it wasn't very good, and so after about 3 months, the whole world gave it up. Minecraft was both new and good, and so kids explored it, realized it was good, and they stayed with it.
Do you think it's important that a game is explicitly educational? Or, I mean, do you think any game can teach someone, especially kids, something worthwhile?
Well, when you say explicitly educational, you mean that it advertises what it's going to teach?
Yeah.
I mean, why would that be important? I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I was asking you if it is.
Well, I think it all depends on your goals. I mean, there are times you want to get a message across. There's times you want to teach somebody about something that they have no interest in, and in that case, sometimes stepping up to it sideways kind of makes more sense. Like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? It was probably more important for that game to say, hey, this is a really fun game, than to say, this is a game that will teach you the capitals of all the countries. Because, no, I don't really want to do that. That sounds really boring to me. Although it may be that, you could play a fun game, and just as a side effect, you'll come away familiar with the capitals of the countries and knowing facts about them.
Right.
So a lot of times being explicit is a little bit of a mistake. I've spent a lot of time making this game Lexica. We had 50 people work on it for about 3 years, and it's a game all about getting kids interested in reading. But we sure don't put that on the box, right?
Yeah.
We just say, hey, check it out, Lexica. It's a cool RPG. And it just so happens that, they get introduced to literary characters, and they're given opportunities to read books, and it builds their vocabulary, and it does all these different things, but that stuff doesn't always need to be kind of in your face.
I mean, do you think any game can teach someone something worthwhile? Even games from the industry?
I don't know that any game can teach something worthwhile, but I think there are a lot of opportunities for positive transformation from games. I think, positive transformation comes from entertainment all over the place, right? There are inspirational songs, and there are stories and plays and movies that really kind of make you reflect on your own actions or like look at this Martian movie that's out,
right,
this weekend.
Yeah.
Right? People are coming away from that with kind of better appreciation of the science of Mars. I doubt there are very many people saying, wow, I can't wait to learn about physical properties of the planet Mars. I'm going to go see that movie. But they're going to come away with that nonetheless because it's in there and it's kind of interesting. So I think that there's certainly opportunities for learning and transformation in straight up regular entertainment all the time, but with straight up entertainment, it tends to be a little more glancing and a little less thorough than with an experience that's all about kind of gaining mastery over a particular topic.
Now, I've heard in some of my other interviews for this project that, like, if you work in AAA and then you go and work in educational games, that in a way it ghettoizes you, where you won't be put on like the A team on a AAA game. Have you heard of that at all? That people who cross over can't really go back or rise past a certain level?
No, I think that's sort of silly. I think if you go away and you work on like really crappy games for a while, I don't think it has to do with the games being educational. I think it has to do with being crappy. If you go and work on crappy stuff and make a bunch of crappy decisions for a while, I can see that it's not going to help build your reputation.
Yeah.
And I think very often, practically, when people are talking about that with AAA, over the last 10 years, generally educational games are 2D and AAA games are 3D. So I think it's made you probably much more a statement. Yeah, you went away and worked on 2D games for several years, and now we're not sure you're in a good spot to. You've probably not kept up with all the changes in 3D games, and so you're probably behind for that reason. But I don't think it has a lot to do with it being educational games or not.
What do you make of the current trend of free-to-play games being aggressively, they're targeting children to play them?
Yeah, I think it's kind of gross and sad, I think, unfortunately. Something I don't, I prefer to stay away from that whenever possible, because all the thinking you have to do in AAA is how can I kind of get people at their kind of weak moment and kind of trigger their impulse in order to pay for a thing, and particularly to do that with children is I mean it's kind of gross to do that with almost anybody, even just designing those for adults. You don't feel very good when you're working on it and thinking about it. And to do that with kids, it feels kind of gross.
No, so you did a presentation against pointsification, right? Is that different from gamification? Just so that I have my terminology correct here.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, pointsification. When people say that word, they're trying to insult this sort of notion of gamifying things in an oversimple way.
Yeah. And
the thing I usually say is that when even the very term gamification is a little bit of it sort of implies naive thinking, because that word, it literally means to make something into a game, right? That's what gamify would mean, make it into a game. And the thing is, usually when people say that isn't what they really mean. What they usually really mean is, hey, I see games are really engaging. I want people to be engaged with my experience in a way that's as strong as when they're playing games. It doesn't necessarily mean they want their thing to be a game, but they want that level of deep engagement. And so I guess the way I look at it is, if you're studying games to understand, well, where does that deep engagement come from? And can varieties of that deep engagement apply to my application? That's the right way to think of it. But to just say, wow, I see some of the surface things that work in games. I'm just going to slap those into my application and see if that works. That's usually not going to be very successful, and is going to kind of make your thing look kind of weird and tawdry. So that's the conversation that I usually end up having with folks, because I have a lot of people who come and say, we're ready to gamify this thing, and then I say, great, well, let's talk about what it's really about. What are you really trying to achieve? And let's figure out like the current motivations of your players and ways we can kind of strengthen those motivations with a variety of systems.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't want to do that. I just want to gamify it, and I'm like, well, then. Yeah.
Who's reaching out? Who's reaching out to you? I'm not asking for names, but like what types of companies or places?
Oh gosh, oh my God, we've had everything from department stores to vitamin companies to just everything. Everything and everybody, has been. Everybody's always trying to figure out a better way to sell their thing.
Yeah. And so I assume, you run into to that and they say, oh, no, we don't want to do that. But I assume then they find someone who just helps them with what they want to do, right? To just sort of like make a game better.
If they're stubborn, they'll find someone who'll just put a bunch of points and stickers and things on their thing. But then a lot of times through this kind of exploration, after they talk to us, they'll talk to some other people, they'll often start to realize, oh, we were looking kind of for a silver bullet. This isn't really a silver bullet. This is actually kind of weird and complicated. And they often drift away from it. Because that's often it. They saw an easy answer and or what they thought would be an easy answer, and they after some exploration realized, oh, all right, not so easy.
Yeah. I mean,
but for other people, like, they kind of get into it and they use it as an opportunity to really study, like, well, what are we about and what are we trying to do, and end up creating some systems that really do work and really do make a difference. That does occasionally happen.
What sort of insights into like how we work has this type of work? Sorry to repeat a word there, but like what sort of insights has it shown a light on?
For me, you mean?
Yeah, I mean for you and just from what you've heard.
Oh, well, I mean, the whole thing sort of forces you to kind of reflect more on, what are people's motivations when they do things? Like, what are they really trying to do, and what do they really need and want? One of them that I think is really interesting is how important progress is to us as individuals. And I think that's often a big piece of what people are looking for when they talk about wanting to gamify something, is that they want to imbue whatever their thing is with a sense of progress, because there's something about progress that's just deeply important to us as human beings. There have been surveys about, what is it that's most important to you in the workplace, and it often comes up again and again, like a feeling of progress, that I'm getting better at my job, that my salary is gradually increasing, that I'm gaining greater mastery over what I'm doing, is important. And even if you look at, it's funny, like if you look at inflation, like when you look at it logically, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Logically it would make sense that the economy would kind of, increase a few points one year and decrease a few points the next year, but generally you'd expect everything to kind of be level. But it's not. It gradually rises. And it's not like it's gradually rising because everybody's getting better at everything, and that everything's gaining more value. It's not what's happening. But what happens is we all want to feel like that's happening. Everybody wants to get a raise every year, whether they should be getting a raise or not. If you're doing the same job for 20 years and not getting appreciably better at it, why would you get a raise? It doesn't make any sense. But people expect that raise, and so, okay, we'll give you the raise, but all the prices are going to have to go up in order to compensate for that, and we're all good with that. We all think that's totally fine because it creates this illusion of progress. And that's just how much we like progress, so we don't care that it completely distorts our economy.
Why do you think progress matters so much to us?
Well, because the brain is all about change. If we didn't have to deal with change, we wouldn't need a brain. A rock just sits around and it's just fine because nothing changes that it has to worry about. But we have to worry about, I don't have enough food, and I don't have enough, reproductive possibilities, and all these things. There's things that are trying to eat me up, and so the brain is all about, okay, what's changing out there, and how am I going to deal with it? And part of the change it cares about is how can I change to be better, and how can I make things better? Because if things are getting better, then okay, then I know I'm on the right track. So I think there's something about that feeling of progress that makes us feel okay. I think it's comforting when there's progress. We're on the right track. Things are going to keep getting better. Even if something goes bad, we're still on an uphill trajectory, and in the long run, we're going to be okay.
Well, I suppose in line with that, I'm curious with your entrance into a career in games. I mean, when you started, what were you hoping it would be a path towards for you?
Oh yeah, my path is really weird because
we didn't really talk about it, but yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, I had kind of a funny path. Initially, when I was younger, I was kind of on a circus performer career for a little while.
Literally?
Oh yeah. And I'd wondered whether I might really pursue that professionally, but after doing it for a few years, I thought it'd be nice to eat 3 meals a day. That might be a nice change.
What were you doing in the circus?
Oh, I was a professional juggler for a few years.
Okay.
But I'd always kind of been doing the computer science stuff. So initially I got really into artificial intelligence because back in the 80s, we really believed that really powerful AI was just around the corner. There was a lot of belief that by the year 2000, we would definitely have computers that could converse like human beings, and that it was really on the way. And so I was really focused on that initially. Then when I got to graduate school, I became really interested in virtual reality and started kind of some focus on that. Now, all along, I'd been kind of doing games as a hobby, but the notion of a career as a professional video game developer, that did not seem even remotely realistic. It didn't even occur to me that would be something that I could pursue. I didn't know anybody who did that. I didn't know anybody who knew anybody who did that. I was going to college at an engineering school in computer science, and I didn't know anybody who knew anybody who did that. Because so much of it was concentrated West Coast, and I was kind of growing up East Coast.
Right.
And so I kind of got into it through the virtual reality angle. I'd been focused on that, and I ended up seeing an opportunity at Disney, and I was like, yeah, I'll sign up for that, and ended up being a really good fit. So that was I kind of came into the game industry sideways because the Disney Virtual Reality Studio was not normal game industry.
Right.
We were working with, we were doing virtual reality with supercomputers in 1995. We were working with 7,000 poly 3D stereoscopic 8 times anti-alias characters in 1995 when the mainstream game industry was working on, the Super Nintendo. So we were kind of ahead of our time that way, and I eventually kind of came into the game industry through kind of sideways that way.
Yeah. Did you have a sense of what you wanted, where you wanted it to take you when you entered it?
Well, I've always liked experiences that were really sort of cool and magical, and for a while I've been really focused on, when I was at Disney, I was really looking at the legacy of Walt Disney and how he always was kind of using new technologies to create experiences that didn't exist before and kind of bring them to everybody. And so a lot of my early focus was that, and even if you look at Toontown Online, it was all about that. We'd had we'd had Ultima Online and EverQuest for kind of for the nerd community, and it was like, well, how do you take that kind of gameplay to bring it to everybody? And even, a lot of my work at Schell Games has been that way too.
Do you feel like some of that has gone away, like the notion from the game industry, the bigger companies of like, how do we bring this to everybody? I mean, I know there's a lot of fixation on like, shooters are really popular, and that seems to be the perception. But I mean, do you get the sense like?
Oh, shoot! Can you hang on 1 second?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Hey, you still there?
Yeah, still here.
Hey, sorry about that.
Oh, I just got one more question after this one for you.
Okay, great.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I was saying, like, do you get a sense, like, people like to paint, like, games coming out from the industry as, increasingly narrow, and they talk about shooters as dominating. I mean, like, what's your opinion? I mean, do you do you feel like there is a lot of that stuff that you were talking about of, like, how do we bring this to everyone?
We always, it's so funny. I mean, there's always a constant complaint of, oh, people aren't creative anymore. It used to be so creative. Really? Is it really getting that much more narrow? I don't follow this.
Yeah.
I mean, everything, how narrow everything is always just has to do with how open the markets can be. And so, I mean, right now we're looking at the golden age of game development, and you can never see a golden age like when you're in it. But we're in the golden age right now because the indies still haven't figured out that they're never going to make any money, and so they're just trying all kinds of wonderful things. The markets are all like super open. All these new technologies are coming out. There's just this huge kind of experimentation and freedom that's like really, really great that we certainly didn't have 15 years ago. So this is a super good time right now, and we'll see. I mean, these things come and go. But the thing that's always true is, you're going to have you're going to have stable things that sell really well, and then you're going to have experimental things that break through, and they're going to sell really well. Like, you know, you've got Minecraft breaking through, and that was crazy how well that did. So I don't know. I mean, you always have a mix because people always want some of the familiar and some of the new.
So, I mean, you were talking a little bit about progress before, and this is usually the question I end on. What do you think video games have accomplished?
That's a really good question in terms of what effects have they meaningfully had on society. So I think there are a lot of things that video games have accomplished. So on one level, you've got all the Marshall McLuhan type stuff that the media you interact with program the way you think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think video games have been able to sort of raise whole generations that they really can reach out and kind of affect things, and that they can change the world, and they've really increased people's sort of the way we interact with the world and the way we interact with technology. So I certainly think there's the McLuhan stuff. It's really hard to say exactly what that effect is, but there's no doubt that the people raised with video games think differently than people raised without them. Other things, though, I think one of the things that video games accomplish that people take for granted is the fact that video games serve as an area, sort of a technological experimentation zone that paves the way for lots of other new innovations. So, for example, the Game Boy came out, and it did all the experimentation about, well, will people carry a screen-based device around with them, and how big should it be, and how long should the battery life be, and all that, way before cell phones and smartphones. And those things were able to draft off of, you know, what we learned in video games. And we're seeing the same thing with artificial intelligence. We're seeing the same thing with a lot of types of internet use. So they provide that. That's another sort of societal thing they provide. It's a way to experiment with technology. I mean, we've got Siri now, but like we had Hey You Pikachu like 15 years ago. And
did the Game Boy predate? Do you remember the personal organizer, the Wizard? Did it predate like the first digital organizers, or am I just misremembering?
I think it probably did. I mean, there might have been some before that. It was certainly any ones that came before that were not successful. Right. It certainly proved that a portable device with a screen could be a successful product. It certainly proved that. And, of course, a lot of those early ones used the same technology. They used the same LCD displays that the Game Boy used. Same thing. I mean, backlit screens, blah, 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 blah. There's just all this stuff. And, of course, now we're going to see the same thing with virtual reality. We're about to see virtual reality come out, and all of the early apps are going to be games. 5-10 years from now, we're going to see all kinds of meaningful industrial, educational purposes for virtual reality, but not until kind of games pave the way and get us all comfortable with the technology. Because the thing with games is they can afford to be sloppy, they can afford to fail. But like, you know, when you're talking about productivity software, it's got to be dead on and right and really meet its goal. But games can be way, way more experimental, so that's an important thing. I suppose
I would be remiss if I didn't ask about what you thought the educational potential of VR might be, or what you're most excited about that you feel like not a lot of people have even fathomed yet.
Well, I'm super excited about VR. We've got a couple titles in production right now.
Right.
One of them's already got a lot of attention, even though, you know, everything's so early. I think it's going to be really the power of VR for education. I think is going to be very, very strong, because VR gives you the ability to really feel like you're in a place, and it gives the ability to really manipulate things in a way that has not been possible in traditional video games or in traditional interactions, because you'll be able to interact with things with your hands in a very human way. And so in terms of comprehending historical settings, comprehending how certain mechanisms work, not to mention places you could never go in real life, like what is it like to live inside a cell? What is it like to be a bat? What is it like to be a fish? Like, you'll be able to do and be and experience these things. And I think that's going to be very powerful from an educational point of view.